Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. The next few days are turning rainy, so it's a perfect time to be inside doing cooking and preserving. I've got heaps of beetroot and parsnips in the garden that need to be moved out, so today we're going to harvest those and take them inside, and over the next few days turn them into something delicious. Now this garden bed here is one that I want to grow some summer crops in, some chilies and capsicums and perhaps some eggplants. I'd like to clear these beetroot out of here. They're certainly ready to go. Also in this garden bed are some of these volunteer parsnips. So I'm going to be grabbing quite a few parsnips from various areas in the garden today. Now why I particularly want to clear these plants out here is because this garden bed needs a bit of work before I get my summer crops in. You can see it's already really drying out because it's lost its organic layer on top, so it does need a really good layer of compost. So let's start with getting some of these beetroot out of here. That's one of my nice pink and white striped beetroots, the Chioggia beetroot. Now I might leave a few of these in the ground. I should be able to compost around those plants and just let those get a little bit bigger. They'll probably benefit from their extra compost as well. The thing that I'll be keeping an eye on with these beetroot though is if they're going to go to seed, and then they get really woody, and so I'll be dragging them out before they get that far. And I've left a few of those little maroon ones in there to grow a bit further as well. Okay, we're going to have a look at moving quite a few of these parsnips. One of the recipes that I'm going to look at making is a parsnip soup, which with the cold, wet weather coming up, I think would be just perfect. So I do need quite a bit of parsnip. I just kind of loosen the ground with this fork rather than turn it over because they're very hard to get out of the ground otherwise. Well, that's a nice looking parsnip. Not a bad start. All right, so we'll continue with a bit more loosening along here and get these ones out as well. Wow, that was a good haul. I'm just going to remove the tops off all of these parsnips, and I'll be feeding that to the chickens. With the beetroot leaves, I'll take those inside and I'll use the tender inner leaves in the salad, and then I'll feed the rest to the chickens. All right, all this can go feed my chickens. This garden here is one that I've grown lots of winter crops in it, and it's still got some leeks in there, and it's still got some beetroot that are ready to harvest today. I've planted it out with some potatoes, so I'm going to be trying to move these crops out that are ready and just give the space over to these potatoes. These Chioggia beetroot are just heading to seed, so I'm going to grab those before they manage to flower and become really woody. That's not a bad size purple beetroot. Another little Chioggia. The three remaining beetroot, can you see that there, are really tiny, so there's no point pulling those. I will just make sure I cover them up. I might even add just a little bit of compost to those to see if we can bring them to life a bit more. Now these bigger plants have been removed, they might just sort of kick on a bit, and they certainly won't be in the way of the potatoes, but we'll give them another chance. What I might do with these beetroot is just remove all the leaves here, because we've got plenty of beetroot leaves to use, and just feed it to my noisy chickens next door. Now while I'm here, one of my recipes for the parsnip soup calls for leek or onion, and I've got plenty of leek, so definitely going to use leek in the recipe. So I'm going to just grab one of those. They're all about to flower and go to seed now, so it's well worth getting out here and using them. Gloves on for this one. These leeks in this garden are buried a bit deeper than the leeks in other gardens, so you have to kind of dig in a bit to get them out. There we go. I'll just strip these leaves off. And that's a good looking leek. I have cut a little bit there. That looks beautiful. Oh, getting heavy. Okay. More volunteer parsnips in this former carrot bed. So we're going to grab those out. And we're also going to grab some of the carrots because one of my beetroot recipes needs carrots. I am going to just plant this trellis out with beans and maybe grow some shade loving greens on that side of it. So we're going to clear out near the middle so I can get my bean seeds in and germinating. Just little carrots really left in this bed here now. So it'll be good to get them all moved on. I've said that, I know, a number of times, but determined to make this a bean bed. Again, we'll cut off those greens now and feed it to the chickens. And I've just grabbed a few more parsnips that were in the middle of a path. So good to get those ones moved on. Some of them mightn't be any good. That one looks like it's rotting, so we might chuck that straight away. And we'll take these other ones inside. And I don't think our basket can fit any more. Just need to grab a little bit of parsley, but I think that'll do us for our wet weather cooking. Just grabbed out the veg from the fridge outside and we can get started now. First thing I need to do is sort out which veg I need for which recipe. I'm going to be making 5 different recipes today, 2 with the parsnips and 3 with the beets. Some to enjoy now and some for preserving to enjoy later. So let's get started and we'll get it all washed as well. I'll start with cleaning up these beets and decide what, if any, of these greens that I'm going to use. Sorry, Ruby, I'm removing the leek greens. It's pretty big and I don't need all of that. We'll give this veg a bit of a soak and that makes it easier to get it clean. While that's soaking, I will just see if I can sort through these greens. They have wilted a bit because I just shoved them in the fridge and I've probably let them go too long. These I would normally keep and put in a salad. The slightly larger leaves I'll often chop up and stir fry up and add to my omelettes or other dishes. And these huge big leaves I'll usually just let the chickens enjoy because I've got lots of greens in the garden and I don't need to be having all of that. Now I'm sure a lot of people will feel that this is a waste, and yes, it was a wasted opportunity, but my chickens love all of these greens and giving it to them is certainly not wasting this produce. With our beetroot all nicely tidied up and washed, I'm just going to separate it out into the recipes I'm going to make. I'm making a roast beetroot dip, which is really delicious, and I'm also going to do a beetroot and carrot coleslaw. So I need 3 beets for the dip recipe, and I need 3 of these gorgeous Chioggia beetroots for the coleslaw. So I'll put those aside. And these remaining beets, I'm just going to slice up and dehydrate for beetroot chips, which is a really delicious way to have beets as a snack. Now I'll be peeling these, so I don't need to get them too clean. With a bowl of chicken scraps and some relatively cleaned home produce. The hardest part of cooking with home produce is done, and that's just getting it prepared for the actual cooking. With the parsnips, I've got about 1 kilo worth here. They are fairly light, so it looks like a pile, but it is about 1 kilo. I'm going to make a soup and a stew. So half of it will go to the stew and half to the soup recipe. Now I am halving the soup recipe. It does call for 1 kilo of parsnip, but I haven't harvested quite that amount. So we'll get 500 grams for that recipe. Okay, and that's close enough. When I'm making a few things at once, I find it's easy to separate the ingredients into different bowls so you don't get too confused and don't use the ingredients up for the wrong recipe. I'm going to start with our beetroot dip. When I roast beetroot, I usually like to just put a few holes in them, let the steam out. And I'm just going to try roasting them in this little dish that I've got. I would normally roast beetroot wrapped in foil, but I'm going to try and avoid using any foil and use this instead. And actually I might just leave that so the steam can sort of come out of there, and we'll see how they go in this container instead. My parsnip puree recipe calls for roasted parsnips, so I'm going to pop them in with the beetroot. Now the beetroot will need about 40-45 minutes, and the parsnips should be ready in say 20 minutes or so. We just have to peel each of the parsnips and then quarter them lengthwise. Now the recipe calls for honey to be drizzled over these and some oil. I'm not using honey, and I'm using tallow at this point, which needs to be melted. So I'm just going to pop these into the oven to get that fat to melt. The fat has melted a little bit. I'll add in a bit of salt. That's 1 teaspoon of salt actually. And just move this parsnip around to get it sort of as coated in the oil as you can. All right, and once all the parsnips are coated in that oil, just pop it back into the oven for 20 minutes, half an hour or so, until all of these parsnips are golden. With our beets and parsnip in the oven, I'm going to move on to starting on the soup, and that's what our leek is for. The recipe calls for a medium leek or a medium onion, and I've got plenty of leek still, so that's what I'm going to be using. Because I'm halving the recipe, I don't need the full leek, so I'm going to just leave that for another day, and I'll just slice up this leek. We're going to be gently sauteing our leek for about 10 minutes or so. The recipe calls for butter to be used, but I'm dairy free, so I usually use this tallow. We'll get that melted, then add in your onion or leek. I'm just going to stir that through. We just want that to slowly wilt down and then sort of start to caramelise. And that's when you get the great flavour. While our leek for the soup is slowly sauteing, I'm just going to get my beetroot that I'm going to use for chips prepared. I will be peeling them, and then I just sort of slice them by hand. All you do then is put them in your dehydrator and dehydrate until crispy. I don't add anything else to them. And because of the sweetness in the beets, they actually are really delicious chip, just like that. I suppose you could add flavours if you wanted to, but in my opinion, if they're homegrown beets, nice and sweet, You don't need to add anything. I usually peel them. You could probably leave it unpeeled. You might just get a more earthy flavour with your chip. I'm not too sure because I've always peeled them every time. Just love these pink and white striped beets. You can use a mandolin for this. I just sort of chop it by hand. Just make sure you don't cut them too thinly because they do really dehydrate down and they can almost become too thin. Now to just spread them out evenly on our dehydrator trays. They dry more evenly if you can get them so they're not overlapping. Then into the dehydrator. And I'm going to put that on at 56 degrees for about 8 hours, but I'll keep an eye on it and see how it's going. It's at about 5 minutes. It's really softened down nicely. After 10 minutes, just add in your minced garlic. Give that a bit of a stir and cook for about 1 minute. The parsnip for the soup needs to be peeled and chopped. Then add it all into your pan, along with some chicken, or you can use sort of a vegetable broth, and we'll bring that to a boil. I'm just going to cover that up now. Once we've got it at a steady simmer, we're going to leave it for about 20 minutes for the parsnips to cook. Now, we'll check on our parsnips, and I think they're looking beautiful. Golden and lovely. Okay, I'm just going to check on how my beetroot are going in here. And the skewer goes through those really easily, so I'd say they are done. So I'll take those out of the oven. I'm going to leave our beetroot to cool down a little bit before I get in there and peel them. And I'll continue with the puree recipe. I'll just chop these parsnips, which have cooled for about 10 minutes, so they're easy to handle. And I'm just going to chop them into kind of large chunks and throw them in my food processor. Now it's important not to overblend the parsnips at this point. They can kind of overblend very easily. So I just use a turbo, which goes for half seconds at a time. I'll just give it a bit of a stir and a couple more pulses, and we're probably nearly there. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to do. You can still see there's sort of big pieces and a lot of kind of mashed up pieces, but I'm going to leave it like that. And I am going to add some olive oil into that. The recipe says to add heavy cream or butter if you like, but I'm just going to add in some olive oil. It's a bit like stirring up potato mash. I'm going to be preserving the parsnip puree. Once you've filled your little silicone squares, just let that cool down before putting it into the freezer. Now you can certainly peel your beets before roasting, but I find it's just as easy to quickly peel them once they've cooled a little bit, and the skin just kind of comes straight off. Just about good as new. That little stainless steel pan did a great job and cleaned off really easily actually. Now we've just got to add all our dip ingredients into a food processor and blend it up. I don't have any basil at the moment, so I've added in some extra parsley, and that's a flat leaf parsley. It's about half a cup of walnuts, about a tablespoon of lemon juice. I kind of guesstimate a lot of these things. About a quarter teaspoon of salt and pepper to taste. Just blend that up a little bit before adding in our oil and water. I'm just going to drizzle that in. Just need to give your bowl a bit of a scrape down before you blend it again, and that's done. Now this dip is something that I like to make when I've got lots of beetroot as well, and I also just freeze it in these little cubes. If it's just me to enjoy it, I'll have one, but I've got a number of people, I'll grab out a number of cubes and just let them defrost in the fridge, and then they're perfect to serve for guests. I like to have this dip with my seeded crackers. Now we are back to our soup, which has been simmering away for 20 minutes or so. So that parsnip should be nice and tender. Yep, that's looking good. So now we're just going to get our stick blender into it. I just kind of pulse it, make sure you're not lifting it up and out, because this is really hot and you don't want it splashed on you. Now we've got it all nice and creamy. I'm just going to add in a bit of salt and I like a good pinch of pepper. The recipe calls for milk to be added, but I'm dairy free, so I'm just adding in some coconut milk. I have a coconut milk powder, so I generally mix it up in my Thermomix. We just give that a stir and you just gently heat it up with that milk in there. And you can add in a sprinkling of fresh herbs if you like as well. And that's our beautiful parsnip soup ready. Well, our rainy day program is 3 recipes done, chips drying in the dehydrator, and we're up to our final recipe, which is the beetroot and carrot coleslaw. I'm going to make the dressing first and then we'll prepare the veg. My Dijon mustard is fairly strong, so I'll just add the 1 tablespoon. And to that I'll add olive oil. Now we've got red wine vinegar, 1 teaspoon of the celery seeds, half a teaspoon of salt, and some freshly cracked pepper to taste. I'm just going to pop the lid on that and give it a good shake. Now to prepare the veg, I'm just going to peel the beetroot, but I will leave the carrots unpeeled. And now we've just got to grate them on the coarse grate setting. Straight into the bowl might be easiest. And the same with the carrots. And finally, we've just got to chop up our parsley and add that to the bowl. Give your dressing another quick shake and add that in. I kind of don't always add in the full amount. Sort of go what you think, and then you can add in a bit more later. It's a personal preference, I think, how much dressing you kind of add into these salads. Now this salad also looks beautiful just with your usual maroon beetroots as well. Now I do have some leftover dressing, but I'll be reserving that and having that on a green salad in the next few days. I'll just keep that in the refrigerator. Well, that's what I call a successful rainy day program. I've got food to enjoy today, some that can go into the freezer, including the dip and the puree, which is kind of like my convenience food. I just grab that out when I need a cube or 2. The dressing I'll certainly use on a salad, and I've got some chips left from my last batch while I wait for the other ones to be ready. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. It really is worthwhile putting in the effort to turn your veg into real food that you can enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.